Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Event Tech Live. Hope you're enjoying day number 1 of Event Tech Live week. Coming up next in just a second, we've got event-led growth. But just to answer somebody's question in the chat box from the previous session, yes, today's virtual sessions will be available online on demand in the next few weeks. Can't tell you exactly when, but we'll put them up as soon as we can. Tomorrow's sessions and the day after, though, we are going to handpick a select number of sessions to live stream out to the world. The rest, if you want to see them, you've got to get there in person. So make sure if you can get to London tomorrow or Thursday, we would love to see you there. Going straight on to our next session today, though, event-led growth is going to be introduced by Mark Kilens. Now, Mark is the CMO of AirMeet, a leading virtual and hybrid event platform. He oversees AirMeet's global marketing team, responsible for brand, demand, lifecycle, and product marketing. Previous to that, let's just say he knows a thing or two about growth within events. So, Mark, looking forward to the session. If you're ready to go, sir, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Great to be with you all here today. Thanks for tuning into today's session. Event-led growth. I would love to know if you've heard of the term. It's pretty new. I want to spend the next 30 minutes or so sharing some best practices, some pro tips, things that you can use literally tomorrow and as you plan your 2023 event strategy out to help you get more ROI from your events and create deeper connections, deeper engagement with your audience, with your attendees. AirMeet's a virtual and hybrid event platform. We have something called the Event Experience Cloud, and we are a huge believer in this event-led growth concept. So let's dive in. I'm going to start with a story, though, because the story is super important, and it's a very personal story. So I want to start with that. So it all begins with who me, Mark, is. I am an extrovert. I love connecting with people. If you know me, I will go to a lot of events. I've gone to a lot of events. I used to go to 3 or 4 events a month pre-pandemic. And then February 2020 happened. And you might be asking yourself, well, that's when the pandemic started. It actually, for me, wasn't the pandemic, why this month is so important. This month is so important to me is because it's when my first child was born, Theodore. You can see him on the slide right now. My life changed dramatically as of the end of February. He changed my life in many, many ways for the better. And then, yes, the pandemic happened. And we all know how that's played out over the last almost 3 years now. And what really happened because of the birth of my first child and because of the pandemic was how I've changed is around the ways in which I connect with people. I'm still this extrovert. I love connecting with people. I love events. I love joining together to learn, to grow. But how I do that now is dramatically different. And I want to ask you folks to take a moment and pause and ask yourself, yeah, maybe it's because of the pandemic. Maybe it's because of things that have gone on over the last 2.5 years. And the pandemic was the trigger that made these changes in your life. But think back to pre-February 2020 and now post-February 2020 and how your life has kind of changed and evolved. I'm pretty sure your preferences, your lifestyles have changed in some way. Maybe for you, it's very significant like me. Maybe for you, it's not as significant. But for me, I used to do all these things in person, gym, commuting, time with friends, in-person events. My life looks a lot different now. My priorities now are much more about my family. And yeah, the pandemic, if it didn't happen, it still would have changed. I would have been forced, though, to accommodate my life in a different way. But because of these 2 major events, I really have become now this digital extrovert. And I want to know, in the chat, who's with me on this? Who has become this digital extrovert? I love, again, the joys of getting together with people, but it's dramatically different. And how I do this now is much more what's on the right-hand side of this slide versus the left. So take a quick look at this. This shift that I experienced because of my first child being born and because of the pandemic, wasn't just something that happened overnight. These shifts have been playing out over the last 30 years, at least 30 years, where the old way of how you would connect with people has been evolving to be much more digital versus just analog based. And now the best event marketers these days understand this. They lean into these macro trends and they understand they got to serve both audiences. You got to serve someone like me, who's more a digital extrovert these days, and you have to serve someone who's maybe still more of an, in-person extrovert. At the end of the day, you have to make sure you're catering to both audiences. And what's interesting is when you look at the stats around this transition to this more digital first way of experiencing events, joining together, connecting, this is a trend that people now have really latched onto. 92% of B2B buyers prefer these virtual sales interactions. 87% of the people take the chance to work in a flexible manner. So it goes back to that lifestyle comment I made before, those preferences, those habits. For most people, these have changed how they live in a pretty fundamental way. And the fact, though, is the key thing to remember is humans always have craved these connections. The power of connection is undeniable with people. People love coming together, meeting one another, networking. That's the beautiful thing of in-person events. This whole Event Tech Live thing that's going on today and then tomorrow and the next day in London, right? Like that's so powerful. We love getting together. But you have to remember that getting together doesn't always mean getting together in the old way, right? That old way. And the other thing to think about is B2B buying requires more connections than ever before. So people now have these kind of new preferences when it comes to connection. But now when it comes to actually being able to help someone buy a product, right, from your business, the ways in which that is done requires more buying, more people in the buying unit, more stakeholders, more engagement. And this is illustrated by this crazy stat. 63% of purchases have more than 4 people involved, according to Forrester. 63%. So over half the time, you're going to have to engage and connect with, build relationships with 4 or more people. I mean, how do you do this, right? Now the question is, like, how do you actually do these things? And the other thing that's remarkable here, these are some fascinating stats. And by the way, if you want the slides, just message me on LinkedIn. I'll get you the slides today. I promise you. Send me a message, take a screenshot of one of these slides, send me a message, and I'll get them to you. In 2016, it was about 5 channels. They said, all right, people like to use 5 channels or so to communicate with people. In 2019, it went up 50%. 7.5. Now in 2021, last year technically, it's up to 10. So now the ways in which you actually engage people requires you to touch them in more different channels, right? Try to reach out to them. And at the same time, it's increasing in terms of the number of interactions required before you make a sale. 27 interactions, 17 to 27 in just the last couple of years are required to actually bring in a new customer. So fundamentally, so much has changed in terms of how you sell to people. And then if you just take out selling and marketing, how people are living their lives. So we have to really lean into how we develop audiences these days and make sure that it's a blend, right? It's always been a blend, but now more than ever, it has to be a blend. So let me share one more stat before we get into the strategies. 62% of marketers agree that events are becoming a key component of their marketing mix. And this has dramatically gone up because of COVID. So COVID did a lot of bad. I also think COVID has done a lot of good for us in many ways. You think back to my story, right? That did a lot of good for me, quite honestly. I used to go to the office all the time. I was this very in-person, analog way of living, if you will, in real life way of living. I would never want COVID to happen, and that's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is there's always, when there's something negative, there's, look at the bright side, right? Glass half full, half empty type of mentality. 62% of marketers think events are really important in driving ROI and helping their business grow. So let's help businesses use events better. And that's the whole point around event-led growth and the things that we're trying to champion at AirMeet. And when you create connection, we all know this, right? The folks listening probably right now, when you create connection, it's going to help you generate more leads, more pipeline, more revenue. It's going to help you bring together that customer experience that might be a bit fragmented and help you think about how do you actually create an experience that builds upon each kind of interaction you have with customers. And that's where I want to talk about events, right? Events, in person and online have some problems though. There's definitely some problems we have to recognize here. And the first problem is virtual events do feel more empty than ever before, because I think there's a combination of not understanding the technology well enough, not understanding how to design an audience, and then the back end of using event technology for that audience, not targeting the right audience. But at the end of the day, they kind of all feel the same and they feel empty. And no one wants an empty event. The other thing that we have to realize is, and I'd love to know if you disagree with me on this, today in-person events are more expensive than ever before. I used to host large in-person events when I was at HubSpot and at Drift. I was responsible for putting on 3 huge events in 2019 at Drift, one in SF, one in Boston, one in London, that had 10,000 people at them. Those same events, trying to do them today, I don't even want to know how much more expensive it is. It's more expensive. And that's not a bad thing per se, right? But there are definitely headwinds because of that, right? And all events across the board, right? If you only do a virtual event, you probably see less attendance than you did a year or two ago if you only do virtual. If you do an in-person event and you don't do virtual, you probably see less attendance than you did pre-pandemic. But if you do both together, either simultaneously, like this event, or maybe separately, or throughout the year, on the aggregate, you'll see more attendance, more engagement if you do both together. And that leads me into this idea of event-led growth. It's about how should you use events, to discover, engage, and grow customers through this immersive and integrated event experience across the entire customer journey. That journey that's going to help your business and your clients grow, generate more leads, generate more pipeline, generate more revenue. The way I think of it is, how do you use events as this strategic imperative within an organization to help you generate attention and then turn that attention into intention? And what do we all want? We want buying intention. I have now the intention to buy your product or service because I went to a few of your events, built that relationship, got to know your brand, got to know how you can help solve my problems. And now I'd love to be a customer. And beyond that, even, how do I turn that customer and turn their love, loyalty for your brand, your product or service into advocacy, into that type of intention? So let's talk about how this works. I'm going to give you some best practices, some details on how to use event-led growth at your business and really lean into all those stats we just talked about. Lean into this change in buying behavior. So it's these 3 phases: discover, engage, and grow. And this is just a great example of what we did in my past company and what we're doing now at AirMeet. How we think about which events to use at which stage of the journey for which particular purpose. So in the discover stage, it's really about how do you generate and how do you discover new leads, new prospects, new accounts? How do you use events to do that? And how do you help them discover more about you? How do you help them discover more about your problems? We'll break this down in the next slide. After that, it's about how do you engage your buyers and customers at a deeper level. When you think account-based marketing, when you think about building those relationships, getting to those 27 touch points that are required now across all those different channels, how do you use events to turn those buyers into customers? And then customers, how do you help them grow their love, their affinity for you and their loyalty for you through events? How do you help them grow by teaching them things, exposing them to new ideas, exposing them to customers like themselves, and grow their value of what you're offering to them through events? So it goes kind of both ways, right? Discover, engage, grow is from the perspective of the business, but also from the perspective of the person attending these events. And the way to do it is through a very targeted, audience-specific way, right? You don't want to have an event that doesn't have a really tight, specific audience to it. So we'll get more into that right now. So discover. Let's talk about discover for a moment. Discover is all about people that are becoming problem aware or even brand aware. They might not know your brand. They might not know a lot about their problems. You're targeting them right through your ICP lens. Maybe it's a little bit broader than that, but you're trying to really make sure people understand your brand and how you can help them. And what you're trying to do is you're trying to create demand, that brand awareness, but you're also really trying to create that topical authority. And it's all about creating earned media these days through events. And trying to drive up the social mentions, try to drive up the engagement, right, through events. And what we're trying to get to are these experiences like on the right-hand side. These are just some ways you could use events at the discover stage of event-led growth. And we have some examples coming up, but this is a great way to plan out, hey, we have to activate some of these new accounts. We have to penetrate into these new accounts. And a pro tip here is use partners to help you discover new leads, new accounts. Do a lot of co-marketing, co-partnership events at the discover phase of event-led growth, and you'll see a lot of benefits from that. Let's go and engage. Engage. these people might know a bit more about their problems. They're trying to understand the solution better. They're trying to evaluate your product, your solution. They might be free product users. They might be, buying at a lower tier that they need to upgrade, or you're trying to get them to increase their usage of your free product. Maybe it's people in free trials. You're trying to engage people that are showing much more buying intent, that are probably maybe in an active buying cycle, or customers, right? A free product user is a customer, in my opinion. And you're trying to engage these people, to teach them more, to build that relationship more, right? And you can see all the things in the middle of the slide that you're trying to maybe get to from an outcome standpoint. But I think from an event standpoint, these types of events that you do can, of course, be both online and in person. But some of the best ones I like to do at the engage phase is targeted events that help a prospect and a customer come together jointly. So this could be a larger scale event, but some of my best favorite events are when you get 20 or 30 prospects and customers, 15 each, say, for example, into a very curated 90-minute experience together. You could do this online. We did this at Drift. You could do it in person. But you get them talking about a similar topic, and you have a host, you have an MC that is guiding that discussion. And some people think of this as the classic dinner. Dinners are great. I'm actually going to one in a few days. But I think the best types of events are when you try to really bring out that experience and get people to remember not only the people they met, but the actual experience that they had because the brand facilitated that experience. And again, like, you could do this in both formats, online or in person. It's just about the intentionality you're having when you connect those dots together. The audience, why would they attend? What are they looking to get out of the event? And so then how would you design that event most appropriately? And then lastly, grow. This is all about customers at this point for the most part. Customers are really large, significant community advocates you have. They might not be customers, but they love the brand. And you're trying to create this kind of flywheel effect. You're trying to take your customer loyalty and affinity and take that to actually help you discover more customers, if you will, through the power of events. And this is all about putting the customer even more so at the center of your event experience, and making sure that you're thinking about, how do I engage customers during my events, and how much of my event mix is for my customers versus prospects. Because if I go back a couple slides, one great way to think about this is literally take a screenshot of this slide and ask yourself, how many events in 2023, or looking back in 2022, have I done for the discover stage versus the engage stage versus the grow stage? It's a great exercise, because you might be like, look, we've been overweighted in one of these kind of stages of event-led growth. And the other tip I'll give you here is, think about your business objectives. What are your growth goals for 2023? Are you trying to enter new markets? What products are you trying to launch in 2023? How can you align your event strategy and calendar to those really high-level strategic business initiatives, and align those things to the different jobs these events are trying to help you achieve? Right? That's the most important thing. That's something we did at Drift. Salesforce has done a great job of this, where you're building this event wave. And I have some examples a little bit later in the next 15 minutes going through what that event wave could look like. But you're really trying to tie how you're going to market using events, and how events can help power your content-led kind of strategy, content-led growth strategy, how events can help you power your product-led growth strategy, how events can help you power your sales-led growth strategy, right? I see events as a pillar to how you go to market these days. And the interesting thing is, we did the survey with Forrester, and they helped us do this huge study recently. And they found that 73% of the people, so 3 out of 4 people that responded to the survey, all senior, CMO level type people, senior executives, they found that 3 to 4 said aligning the right events to the right audience at the right time leads to more growth. So the key is that alignment between those 3 things, and being much more intentional about your events, especially when you think about the economy that we're going into, especially when you think about like the costs going up and virtual feeling stagnant. How do you make sure that you're much more thoughtful about aligning those 3 things together? And when you do, you'll see more growth. So here's a quick example. So 10 Bounds, if anyone knows 10 Bounds, that's fantastic. They're a great organization. They use event-led growth pretty much exclusively to fuel their business. You can see that they're using it to increase their brand awareness. They're using it to discover new audiences, educate their prospects and customers, and build this like thriving community of customers. So they're literally using all three phases. And they're doing this through a combination of monthly and quarterly events and twice a year annual flagship events. They actually have an event literally happening, I believe it was this week or maybe last week. That was their end of year flagship event. And they're using each of these events as building blocks to build those relationships and get people to these bigger, larger events, number one, that are also hybrid. So they're doing in person and online now, but they're using it to generate 50% of their growth through these marketing centric events. And you can see a great quote from David here. And his whole thing is, how do I not only put on these events, but how do I take all of the things that happen before the event and after the event and use them as growth catalysts as well? And we'll get to those examples in just a moment. I got two great examples for you in terms of how you can do that right now in your organization. The way to also think about event-led growth is about how do you put the attendee at the center of the event experience. I think sometimes this is lost upon people, right? When you think about customers at the center, of course, customers at the center, but like, how do you design an event that's purposely designed for each attendee versus your goals? Now, you have goals, of course, but are you giving enough thought to why would the attendee sign up, show up, engage, and then actually say something really nice about the event, right? It kind of completes that loop. If you can have an attendee do all those things, I think you've made a pretty successful event as long as the attendee thinks so as well, right? And it's about how do you connect the event experience from an attendee's point of view to the content, to the speakers, to your brand, to networking, so to one another, to each attendee. And how do you make sure that the event is something that creates this memorable moment for them, right? It's not just good enough to get them together. It's what you really need to do is make sure that that time that you ask them to take out of their day is something that they're going to really remember. So the way that I think you need to think about this is from this idea of engagement exposure. The stats back this up in the beginning, but when you think about how do you create an attendee first experience, you're thinking about how do I use events and event-led growth to increase my lifetime value of my customers through the power of events. So what events are going to help them get to the point of taking a demo or first sales meeting with us? What types of events can we create to help them get to the point of purchasing? What types of events can we create to help them, get to a point of renewal and expansion? And not only just events, but what can we do with the things that happen at events, the content that's created, the ideas that are shared, all of the greatness that comes out of an event, because I think events act as the center of gravity. How can we use that to increase engagement exposure? Because exposure alone is not good enough these days, right? Attention is not just good enough. You need to take attention and turn that into intention, and that's the point of using something like this magnetic field of an event, right? This center of gravity to pull in attention, but to turn the attention into intention. And you think about this ripple that happens when you put on an event. You have people talking about it, of course, through the content you create pre and post the event, the social stuff that happens, but then the word of mouth. Because if you look at like actually self-reported attribution data, which is something, by the way, I think everyone listening should try to set up for your own company. Self-reported attribution is the process in which you ask someone when they request a demo or during more lower funnel type of content or offers, how did you hear about us? How did you hear about AirMeet, for example? And what you'll find is more and more people are going to be leaning into those three things, those three ripples that an event helps you create. So again, acting as a center of gravity, an event is a super powerful force. And if you're listening and you're on a marketing team, an internal marketing team, or if you're listening and your event provide agency, and you're helping marketing teams put on events, you have to also realize that events are a great way to align the marketing team together and not waste activity amongst marketing team members. So for example, if you take this mindset that an event is tied to this larger business initiative, say it's a product launch, or say it's a new messaging or a new campaign, and you use that event as the trigger thing, the thing that triggers the idea of a campaign that you can wrap the whole team around, the channels we'll use to activate this, the content that comes from this, you're going to create a 1 + 1 = 3 scenario where the event is the force that gives you, is a force multiplier, I should say, that gives these other teams the ability to achieve their goals while being aligned around this theme, around this one particular offer, which is the event that's tied to this, again, larger business initiative. So using events to align marketing teams maybe isn't that a new concept, but I think, again, when you're coming into an economic downturn, when you're looking at all these things, how do I create more efficiency across my marketing team? I'm looking to an event to help me do so. And this is another great visual. Again, if you want these slides, send me a message on LinkedIn. Happy to send them to you. This is a great visual that shows, hey, if the event is the center of gravity, how can all these different teams or functions within a marketing team take advantage of the event? All of these things that can come from an event. And I have two examples I want to go through with you right now, like I promised a few minutes ago. Two examples I want to go through with you right now before we wrap up that show you the power of events acting as this just really gravitational pull. I almost think of it as a solar system where you have the sun in the middle, right, and you have all these 8 planets orbiting the sun, and you have the planets having moons, right? So think of that from your event strategy almost, right? The event is the sun, and all of these other assets, these planets that orbit the sun, can come from the event that you put on. So here's two examples. So when I was at Drift, I was VP of Content and Community. The events team rolled up underneath me along with content, brand, community. We did a lot of events at Drift, both in person and online. And we did an event, this is ironically right before the pandemic happened. This was an online event before the pandemic happened. So we were doing this, I would say, even before this big change happened, where we did I think it was actually 4-hour event with a lot of co-marketing partners, a lot of people that had a similar belief system to us, right? Similar ICP match. And we did an event that was called A New Funnel for a New Decade, right? So we did a live event. We planned it out to the T. And what we did as we were planning that event, we knew that we were going to create some content from this event. Not just content that's ad hoc, but we knew we were going to create a book because of how we planned the event. And we were going to create pillar pages on our website to go after certain SEO related keywords. So you can see the book on the left-hand side. You can see how we kind of optimized our website for these different videos that came out of the event, right? These snippets. So this is a great example of taking an event and creating a really large converting content asset after the fact. It's all about how you plan it, though. And here's another example from go-to-market partners. They created a content asset first, then they did an event or a couple of events after the fact. So they created this massive comprehensive guide about going to market. It's a great resource. Check them out, go-to-marketpartners.com. So they started with a content asset and they said, no, let's turn that asset into an event experience where we get people together. There's like 60 or 70 people in a room for 4 hours, network, but also make it a really educational event. This is all about really hitting on the discover. They were using this to discover new accounts and leads and using it to then slowly get them to engage more, because after they did the in-person event, as you can see on the right-hand side of the slide, they're now doing 3 online events to go even further and deeper into the content. Just a great event-led growth type strategy. And the key to think about when you do this type of strategy is how do you prioritize the audience coming to the event, right? What are your grade A to E accounts and what's their buying intent? And when you think about your event strategy, you really want to make sure that you think about the green first, the yellow second, and the red, I would argue, it's the halo effect. Don't even do a targeted type of event for the red. They might come because you're creating events for the green and yellow segments, but you shouldn't be creating events for the red. If you are, or you're not sure, you got to get a little bit tighter on how you actually pre-qualify accounts or buyers when you design events, and how involved are they or how far along are they in the buying journey when it comes to buying intent signals. And the other thing I'll give you as a recommendation is don't forget about positioning. We talked about discover, engage, grow, but when you think about events, what message or theme are you trying to get across during the event? And some events are much more about brand positioning. Some are much more about value positioning. And yes, an event can be both, a blend of both or a blend of a couple of these. But as you craft that event story and you do that pre-production and planning, just don't forget to think about your positioning level when it comes to also the audience at the same time. Again, it's about targeted, really specific events more so than ever before, especially when it comes to in-person in 2023. And just two quick examples, Partner Hacker and Partner Stack partnered together to create this amazing event, which led them to realize, wait a minute, we should do more events together because they can help us discover new accounts, engage our buyers right now and engage our customers. And if we build this event wave over the next, couple of quarters, this can really drive a lot of business. As you can see that through this result, right? Like just one event they did back in June generated a tremendous amount of engagement. It was just an online event. It wasn't anything to do in person. It was just online. And it was because it was an integrated event that happened within these two companies, and the two companies partnered up. So don't forget the power of partnerships. And lastly, don't forget about internal events, the events that you can do inside your company. Comcast is a huge AirMeet client. They use AirMeet for all of their big internal events. And this is creating deeper employee engagement, which is reducing churn, reducing employee turnover at Comcast. They've done this huge study with us. It's fascinating. And don't forget that internal events are just as good when it comes to event-led growth as external events. Discovering new employees, engaging your employees, growing employees from an advocacy standpoint, all can be done using events as well. Don't underestimate that power. And just remember, we're trying to create a world where people can join together and meaningfully connect from anywhere. And events are the foundation of that future world, of today's world even, but that future world, right? So don't forget that. And if you want these slides, shoot me a note on LinkedIn. If you have any questions about event-led growth, AirMeet, shoot me an email. Thank you so much for listening. Hope you enjoy Event Tech Live. And hopefully I'll see you there maybe next year in person. I'm just based out of Boston, just north of Boston. And would love to get over there next year. So thanks again for listening, and hope you have a great rest of the event.
And Mark, we'd love to have you next year. I say if you can get down tomorrow, though, do come and join us. But as I say, it'd be fantastic to see you. Fantastic presentation there. I love the fact you touched on experiences and how important they are, what events deliver. I was literally looking at my business card going, it doesn't even say event planner on there. I've literally got experience creator because I'm with you. I think that is where things are going. Leave people with that lasting, image, like feeling. What do they take away? What is their association with the brand? A lot of people connecting with what you were saying in the chat as well. We've got John from Florida. Thanks for joining us, John. One recent association client of ours chose to have part one of their event virtual in September, and then part two in person in October. Thought it was a really interesting way of bringing the two together. I thought you'd like that, Mark. And Lindsay as well saying, we've been doing some interesting things with our customers, hosting their hybrid events. They're able to thank and appreciate attendees both in person and virtually with targeted and personalized gifting streams at different financial points, and it's worked really well. So I think you've hit the nail on the head. I'll be definitely getting in contact with you for those slides as well. I thought they were absolutely brilliant. But Mark, thank you very much for your time today. Thank you very much for your insight. Really appreciate it. And thanks for being part of Event Tech Live 22.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Fantastic stuff there. Hope you enjoyed that, guys. Keep those questions and comments coming in the chat. It's great to have your involvement. Coming up next in around about 9 minutes time at 4 o'clock UK time, calculating event emissions to take sustainable actions. In the meantime, I'm going to take a short break. I'm going to go and put some different teeth in, and we'll see you back here in 9 minutes time.